right, Kevin with Tanglewood Legacy Advisors, is
Correct,
that right?
yes.
All right. Well, tell me a little bit about how your business intermingles with the M&A market.
Sure. So we are fractional CFOs for large families, predominantly in the Texas area.
Okay.
And most of those families have operating companies in them. And so we are on the planning side for the families and helping those generally founder-owned or founder-led, family-owned businesses get ready for a transition.
Interesting. So basically, you're a facilitator of sorts. You are like an interim CFO, is what you're explaining to me.
We are. So we start generally working with a lot of the family members and the family dynamics as we get to know the operating business. And one of the things we see with founder-owned companies is that there's a lot of emotion involved.
Sure.
And there's also a lot of stakeholders, right? We may have family members that are not involved in the business, but may have ownership stakes. Sure. And so anytime a founder-led business that has a large family surrounding it is thinking about a transaction, there's a lot of, I must say, levers that can and need to be managed as they get ready to go to market.
Right.
And so we spend a lot of time getting those folks prepped to go to market and then coming to organizations like AM&AA to help connect us with the right people to then actually help get the deals done.
Sure. So that was going to actually be a lead into my next question, which is typically how does your ideal client typically find you, or are you usually finding them?
Sure. Most of it at this point is by referral.
Okay.
We are a fairly selective boutique firm, so we're not looking to work with hundreds of families, right? We're very focused on serving a few families very well. So most of those come through referrals. If we have an owner in a business that we've helped get across the finish line, they're generally very strong advocates of us. And one of the interesting things is that oftentimes, in the transaction world, you have a lot of people that are owners that want to kick the tires, but they may not be ready. They may be 3 to 5 years out.
And some of them, if I'm correct, likely don't even know that process that goes into that, and they sometimes might even think that there's more to it than what you guys have already perfected. So when you come in there, you can really help streamline that process.
Correct. So one of the things we spend a lot of time doing is due diligence on the team members that we're bringing onto the team.
Okay.
And so we spend a lot of time making sure that their tax advisors are going to be able to help navigate the deal, right? To make sure that we've got the right attorneys. Everybody in this community has probably been through deals where if you have professionals on the team that aren't experienced or deals really aren't what they do, it can be a big hindrance. And for me, that hindrance is just going to cost money to our families, right? So we are maniacally focused on bringing together the right team to help get it across the finish line for them.
What does that process usually look like? Let's say from start to finish, when you have an interested client that you start really just warming up in the process. What's that look like from start to finish?
Sure. Often it is starting with the conversation about value. It's one of the hardest things we all talk about. Nobody likes to be told their company isn't worth what they think it's worth.
Exactly.
I am often that bearer of bad news to start. And that happens over time. But one of the things that really is a kind of pivotal conversation point for us is there can be a lot of zeros. There's large numbers when we look at some of the deals, but helping to distill those large numbers into what it actually means to the individual family members. Right? So somebody may be stuck on a certain country club multiple, as I call it, right? And want 7x for their business, but they have an offer at 6.7. And it looks like a lot of money on the table, but if there's 7 different families involved in the business and 10 folks per family, when you look at do you hold out for that extra 3/10
right.
of a multiple, and it's going to make a difference in, $10,000 a month of spending,
Right.
which at those levels is really inconsequential. So really connecting the dots between kind of the traditional transactional world of here's a value, but not only here's how much you can take home after taxes, fees, etc., but then what does that mean to you long term from a planning standpoint? So it's really a blend of financial planning in the business and financial planning on the personal side.
So when the customer comes in and they go through this discovery phase, how many people are they typically working with when it comes to your company? Is there different positions for different people, analysts and so forth?
So within our company, so our company is a staff of 9, looking to hire another right now on the analyst side. And
Nice.
so we have specialists broken down to kind of tackle each area.
Right.
So for us, there's several areas that we look at the intersection of the family wealth and the business. And so we have folks and analysts that spend all day together pro formas, calculations, working capital calculations to help ahead of a deal make sure we understand what direction it may head,
Right.
to help get to numbers. And then that parlays into the folks that handle financial planning, wealth management, investment management that will do some of the forecasting and modeling on the personal side.
What's the economy looking like in your world as far as the amount of business? I mean, having just gotten over the pandemic where there was probably a lot of companies that were struggling and now things are starting to pick back up. What's that looking like in your world?
So for us, we saw a few things. Like many folks, we saw the pandemic was a bit of a divide from a number of our clients, right? Some did really well and some struggled. And we saw a number of very strong exits. And that was for the folks that were doing well, they realized, hey, now is the time to go. And so we had a lot of successful exits. What does it look like going forward?
Right.
We've seen a number of folks, and you see it in a lot of the kind of the headlines of whether it's the Great Resignation or people moving and all of these things where people have maybe reconsidered life a little bit and said, maybe I'm not going to be here forever. So the recent conversations, we have several that have bubbled up in the last few months that have said, yes, we're ready to go. It has been on that front where starting to realize life is a little short. You have a health scare or two mixed in there.
Yeah.
And so we think we're going to see probably continued number of good companies going to market that haven't been. It will be interesting timing to see how it works out with what our economic drivers do and interest rates and how that impacts value. And do people get excited hearing one set of values?
Sure.
And if they're lower moving forward, do we back away from the table?
Do you have any indicators typically that you've noticed in these sales and just in the process in general? Any indicators that those who are kind of on the fence right now that you can kind of, even in your, I hate to say sales process, but when you're speaking with these people and doing this discovery, I mean, are there any major indicators where you're like, look, this is the time, this is what you got to do?
We spend a lot of time talking about liquidity, right? And we talk a lot about family liquidity. We talk a lot about liquidity when it comes to complex estate planning. But we also talk about liquidity and how it relates to private capital markets, right? And so we do very much talk very early on about kind of the liquidity in the private capital markets, how that flows, how it's different from kind of traditional corporate finance theory. And a lot of the conversations we're having are, if you're not ready to go now, let's just be ready to continue to hold tight on the business for another 5 years.
5 years, okay.
Right? If we head into a trough, we're not, or may not be in it now.
Right.
But if it goes south, right, we need 3 years at least. And so then they need to show the track record. So that's kind of the counsel that I've.
And being prepared to always have that conversation is like one of the most important factors, because that's, to me, if anything, it's having that initial discovery phase, knowing that you guys are there and ready to have that conversation. to me, preparedness is like a number one thing, especially in an economy like we've got right now.
It's huge, and that's one of the things that has ticked up a lot with a number of our families is the desire to go through a pre-due diligence process.
Right.
And so we start that with a number of companies to say we don't know when's going to be the right time, but let's go ahead and do all, albeit painful, right? All of the pre-due diligence on ourselves before we get to market, so that we know if there's chinks in the armor.
It makes sense.
We've got time to address them now.
So, what's your ideal client look like?
Ideal client, we've got a pretty wide range. We're not industry specific, but all typically, certainly all family owned. Most are founder led. Tend to be in the 2 to 50 million in EBITDA range.
Okay.
And other than that, it's the willingness to listen and the desire to do right by their family.
And where are they typically finding, your businesses like yours? Again, are they actively searching for that? Is it something that, again, you say that it's mostly referral, word of mouth. However, in your case, when you're servicing those individuals, where are you going for those resources?
So one of the other things that we have done that has been very successful is to give talks to peer-to-peer CEO groups.
Okay.
So there's a number of different types of groups, right? You have Vistage, YPO, EO, any of those groups. And that is one of the roles that I fill, is go in and give talks just to help educate them on whether it's, market dynamics, liquidity, what to do for catastrophic succession planning, right? So we focus on a lot of planning that is going to be outside of the realm of kind of an intermediary or investment banker, right? We let them do that part, but there's a lot of other topics that we go around the country giving talks on, and that is the other place that has really generated, especially once you have one person in that group that sees the value, because what we do isn't common. Nobody goes out and says, look, my family needs a CFO to help us mitigate planning for the next 5 years, because you don't know what you're missing.
And it's so funny because so many aspects of life are just like a business, and you're actually attacking that point head on.
That's right. It is that intersection. And so when we're engaged, they typically already have some of the best CPAs and attorneys.
And they're money smart. They understand the numbers, they understand the data. They're just not applying it to those other factors of their life.
And oftentimes there's just gaps between the way either something was drafted and how it was implemented. And so we find a lot of the value kind of in those intersections with all those team members, which is, again, why we spend a lot of time on the team and making sure that's right for their family.
So obviously you're not the only one in the business, right?
Sure.
But what are the key features and benefits that you would say that your company represents?
I think it's rare to find a company that has expertise that actually spent time in the investment banking world. And so I spent several years doing buy side. It was about 12 years ago I decided to switch over and start working on helping folks prepare and get ready, because I used to be that guy on the other side of the fence doing due diligence, right? So I know who we're going to be competing against. But then also bringing together the expertise of a trust officer on staff to help you understand how your estate planning docs are going to interface with the sale and what we need to do ahead of time, right? Having wealth planners that can help you understand, is 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 million enough?
Sure.
Right? Do we have a private plane in the future? What's the running cost going to be? How are we going to source that jet, right? So there's a lot of nuances, and I think there are a lot of really good firms that are experts and individual ones.
Yes.
But we keep finding so much value in those gaps, right?